At the same time, at this very early age, I was very well aware that any factual basis compares to an underdefined system of mathematical equations in which there are less equations than factors unknown. And this means that there are infinite many potential approaches or solutions to any factual basis of which I know. Infinite many theories, infinite many explanations. And of those infinite many, I consider a solution valid, a theory valid, a mapping valid, mappings based on such a factual basis. And I expect from this validity that we can explain this factual basis, interrelation between its parts, components, with relative ease. It's comprehensive. And based on such interrelation, we can also develop new, valid technologies, and not just an ultimate explanation that explains it all. The structure of such a valid mapping is co-defining the advances of technology which can made with such a mapping. And yet, regardless of this obvious fact, many modern physicists seem not to be aware of this, and they are still having the ludicrous creationist attitude-based intent of trying to explain it all, which is based on the utter fallacy that claims that there can only be one truth. Look at what I said about the system of equations with infinite many solutions. Many of them still are influenced by their religious upbringing, and naturally their primitive human brains try to develop creationist principles on just one form of energy. Yes, I do have the heretic assumptions that regardless how many forms of energy we discover, presently I know of only two, and academia-based modern physicists are assuming one and only one, and this is here just for a few centuries. There will always be some form of energy beyond. How did the Romans say? Nihil novi hac in orbe. Nothing new on this planet. A lot of modern-day creationists who call themselves objective scientists or the like apparently still have a few black holes, too many, in that place between the ears where the human brain is supposed to be. Just like their predecessors who burned people at the stake. And they happily block progress wherever they can, based on some emotional blockages, ideological blockages, vested interest, and whatnot. A new approach to what was called radionics became necessary. The explanations for these methods, as they were given in the past, did not lead to many new and useful technologies. They did in the beginning, but later they did nothing but explain, and again explain, and as I mentioned earlier, infinite many explanations can be construed upon the factual basis relating to radionics, what we know of it. To this point in time, the existing radionics theories or explanations had one thing in common. They were explanations, sometimes pretty neat ones, but they didn't automatically lead to new technologies. I repeat here what I said before. For a mapping, one of the infinite many possible, or for a theory concerning a factual basis, such as radionics, I consider important, number one, that it can be used to explain a large amount, not necessarily all, of the phenomena observed within this factual basis. Number two, that it almost effortlessly leads to new basic facts and to the development of new technologies. These criteria appear to me as being the most important two criteria of the usefulness of such a mapping. Using new terminologies such as morphogenetic fields or higher planes and whatnot, that allowed to neatly construe a mapping but which did not lead to new basic facts and not lead to new technologies, would have compared to explaining radionics as the sole work of one or more dominant gaseous mammals above the clouds. Such a thing can be viewed as an explanation, sometimes as a good one, and at the same time its usefulness is practically nil. This, my new approach, became necessary because of antiquated assumptions and antiquated attempts to explain radionics and why it works, and its failures. Most of these theories in radionics never led to new development. Some of them were quite neat, as I said, as being in tune with some pop scientific or alternative views of how the universe is structured. These approaches simply have proven to be insufficient, which means they held back a lot of potential of the radionic approach, and there was hardly ever any mention of how radionics related to other action at a distance. My new approach takes care of this, and I prefer this approach. I call it approach of permanent abstractions, because it leads to new technologies. What method is used for such an approach, symbols or radionic rates or mantras and whatnot, is pretty much irrelevant as far as the success of the operation is concerned. And radionics has the advantage of enormous flexibility. It never was a frequency anyway, giving the mainstream person the capability of taking advantage of manifestation techniques is one of the many beneficial consequences of this new approach and new technology.